Welcome back to SERA Mythology. We have been moving through time and space on this journey. We started in ancient India, where a pillar exploded into divine fire. We went to Greece, where a woman's suffering was turned into a weapon. We went to Mesopotamia, the oldest civilization that ever put a story into writing, and followed a grieving king to the edge of the universe. Today we cross into West Africa. And I want to say something before we begin, because this matters. The mythology of West Africa, and specifically the Yoruba tradition of what is now southwestern Nigeria, Benin, and Togo, is one of the most sophisticated, most internally coherent, and most globally influential cosmological systems ever developed by any civilization anywhere on Earth. And yet it is among the least known in mainstream mythology circles. Most people who grew up consuming myths learned about Zeus and Odin, and very few learned about Ogun or Shango or Obatala. That absence is not an accident. It is a consequence of history. And one of the things SERA Mythology exists to do is to fill that absence. Because when you encounter the Yoruba tradition fully, when you sit with its understanding of the cosmos, of the divine, of human fate and human freedom, you realize you are in the presence of something that has been asking the deepest questions about existence for thousands of years and answering them with extraordinary beauty and precision. This tradition did not only survive its own history. It traveled across the ocean, carried in the bodies and memories of enslaved people, and took root in the Americas with such tenacity that today it is one of the fastest-growing spiritual traditions in the world. In Cuba, it became Santeria. In Brazil, it became Candomblé. In Haiti, it blended into Vodou. In Trinidad, it became Shango. In the United States, it found millions of practitioners. The Orishas, the divine beings at the heart of Yoruba belief, are worshipped today on every continent. They are alive. That is not a metaphor. For the people who follow this tradition, the Orishas are genuinely, actively present in the world. They are not distant gods who retired after creation. They walk with us. Let us meet them. But first, the beginning. The absolute beginning. In the Yoruba understanding of creation, before anything else existed, there was Olodumare. This is the supreme being, the source of all sources, the one who existed before existence had a name. Olodumare is not easily approached directly. In the Yoruba tradition, Olodumare is so vast, so beyond the capacity of human minds and human language, that there is very little mythology about Olodumare directly. No stories of Olodumare having a bad day or falling in love or arguing with other gods. Olodumare simply is the ground of being, the source from which everything else flows. From Olodumare come the Orishas, divine beings, energies, personalities, each one representing a fundamental force or aspect of reality. There are said to be 401 Orishas, the number 400 in Yoruba tradition signifying completeness plus one, meaning the Orishas are beyond counting, beyond complete enumeration, always one more than any list you could make. But the primary Orishas, the ones whose stories and personalities and domains are most fully developed, are numerous and extraordinarily vivid. And today we are going to meet the most important of them through the story of how the world was made. At the beginning, the Yoruba tradition tells us, there was only sky above and primordial water below. The sky was the domain of Olodumare and the Orishas. The water below was formless, without land, without shape. It was the domain of Olokun, the Orisha of the deep ocean, a being of immense, ancient, unknowable depth, keeper of the mysteries that exist below human comprehension. Olodumare called an assembly of the Orishas and announced that the time had come to create the earth. The Orishas would descend from the sky on a great chain and build a world in the primordial waters below. The Orisha chosen to lead this task was Obatala. His name means King of the White Cloth. He is the Orisha of purity, of creation, of the sky, of the high places. He shapes the physical form of human beings in the womb. When a child is born with any physical difference or unusual form, that child is considered especially sacred to Obatala, bearing the mark of his particular attention. His color is white. His energy is clarity, patience, precision. Obatala prepared for the descent. He was given the tools of creation, a snail shell filled with sand, a five-toed hen, and a palm nut from which a great palm tree would grow. He was also given a chain long enough to reach from the sky to the primordial waters below. He began to climb down the chain. But before he reached the bottom, an extraordinary thing happened. Orunmila, the Orisha of wisdom, divination, and destiny, who sees the past and the future simultaneously and holds the knowledge of what will and should happen, warned Obatala about a specific danger on the journey. He told him clearly, "Do not drink palm wine on the way down." Obatala passed several celebrations of the other Orishas on his way along the chain, and at each one he drank palm wine. By the time he reached the end of the chain, hanging above the primordial waters with the tools of creation in his hands, he was not in the state of clear-minded precision that creation requires. He poured the sand from the snail shell down into the water below. He released the five-toed hen. The hen scratched at the sand and spread it outward in every direction. Where the sand fell and the hen scratched, land appeared. And the land that was first formed is called Ile-Ife, the sacred city at the center of the Yoruba world, the place where the earth was first made. But then Obatala attempted the next part of his task. He was supposed to shape the forms of the first human beings from clay. And he did. He worked through the night. And in his clouded state, some of what he shaped was imperfect. Some figures were formed with limbs that did not work as they should, with eyes that could not see, with bodies that did not fit the usual pattern. When Obatala became sober and saw what he had done, the grief he felt was absolute. He swore an oath that day that he would forever be the protector and champion of all those born with physical differences, all those whose forms were unusual, all those whom the world might overlook or dismiss. From his mistake came one of the most profound ethical commitments in all of Yoruba spiritual life, the absolute sacred value of every body, in every form it takes. This is a creation story about imperfection and its sacredness. Not despite the mistake, but because of it. Ile-Ife became the center of the earth. And from Ile-Ife, the Orishas descended and took up their stations throughout the world. Now let me introduce you to the Orishas whose stories you need to know, because each one is a universe. Ogun is the Orisha of iron, war, labor, and the forge. He is the one who clears the path through the wilderness with his cutlass. He represents the raw, transformative power of metal, which in the ancient world meant the power to build cities, to till fields, to make weapons, to forge civilization itself out of the raw material of nature. Ogun lives in the forest and in places of work and battle. He is fierce, uncompromising, deeply honest. He cannot tolerate lies. Every person who has ever worked with their hands, every blacksmith, every soldier, every surgeon wielding a scalpel, every person who has ever cut through something that needed cutting, belongs in some sense to Ogun's domain. His mythology is filled with passion and tragedy. There is a story of Ogun returning from a long time in the forest, emerging back into human civilization, and finding people in a village who did not immediately recognize him and show proper greeting. In his fury, a terrible thing happened. Then, coming back to himself, seeing what his own uncontrolled rage had caused, Ogun retreated back into the forest, and no offering or persuasion from any Orisha or human being could bring him out. It took Oshun, the Orisha of love and sweetness, to stand at the edge of the forest and sing, and offer honey, which is her sacred substance, to draw him back. This story is not just mythology. It is psychology. The man of iron who can only be reached by the woman of honey. The force that destroys when unrestrained, that can only be called back by love and sweetness and beauty. Every person who has ever known someone whose rage or grief had taken them somewhere unreachable, and who had to find the right approach, the right word, the right moment, to bring them home, will recognize this story. Shango is the Orisha of lightning, thunder, and justice. He was also, in the historical tradition, a real king of the Oyo Empire, one of the most powerful kingdoms in West African history. After his death, he was deified, elevated to Orisha status, which is itself a remarkable theological concept, that a human being of sufficient greatness can, through their life and their deeds and their particular embodiment of divine energy, become an Orisha. The boundary between the human and the divine is not fixed. It is permeable. Shango is dramatic, royal, magnetic, and fierce. His sacred number is 6. His colors are red and white. His weapon is the Osh, the double-headed axe, which represents the dual nature of lightning. It destroys and it illuminates. He demands justice. He punishes liars, thieves, and the unjust with his thunderbolts. When lightning strikes a tree or a building, in the Yoruba tradition, that is Shango's direct intervention in the world, his judgment arriving with fire and sound. There is a famous myth of Shango involving his own power. He was experimenting with a powerful medicine that was supposed to grant him the ability to call lightning at will. He tested it from the top of his palace. Lightning struck his own home. His wives and children were killed. Overcome with grief and guilt, Shango left the palace, went into the forest, and hanged himself from an iron tree. His followers refused to accept that he had simply died. They said he had not died. He had gone into the earth. He had gone up to the sky. He had become the storm itself. And the phrase that became his praise name in the tradition is Obakaso, the king did not hang. He transformed. He ascended. He became. This is one of the most powerful mythological statements about grief, guilt, and the possibility of transformation that exists in any tradition on earth. A being so consumed by what he had caused that he could not remain in his earthly form, who transformed that unbearable weight into something vast and powerful and present in every storm that has ever rolled across the sky. Oshun is the Orisha of rivers, fresh water, love, fertility, beauty, and the sweetness of life. She is associated with the Oshun River in Nigeria, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the few in the world specifically designated for its sacred rather than architectural significance. Every year, the Osun Osogbo Festival draws hundreds of thousands of people to the river's edge. Oshun is present in the water. She is the love that sustains. She is the honey that draws Ogun from the forest. She is the patience and the sweetness that makes life worth living when everything else has grown heavy. Her mythology is full of moments when the divine order was in crisis and only Oshun could resolve it. When Olodumare excluded Oshun from a council of the male Orishas and they went to create the world without her, everything they attempted failed. The crops died. The rains would not come. Children could not be born. The world was dying. The male Orishas went back to Olodumare in defeat and admitted they could not do it alone. Olodumare told them they had made a grave mistake in excluding her. They went to Oshun, brought offerings and apologies. She listened. And then she agreed to rejoin the work of creation. Immediately the world bloomed. This story is not subtle. It is a statement, made in a patriarchal world, about what happens when feminine energy, feminine wisdom, feminine presence is excluded from the work of building a world. The world fails. It has always been and will always be this direct. Yemoja is the mother of waters, the Orisha of the ocean, the primordial mother. She is the source of all rivers that flow into the sea. She is the one who holds the deep. Her name means mother whose children are like fish, because her children are uncountable. She represents the womb, the sea, the vastness of love that a mother holds for every child she has ever brought into the world. She is vast. She is deep. She is fierce when threatened, and she is gentle as waves on a calm day. When enslaved Africans were forced across the Atlantic, they carried Yemoja with them in their memories and prayers. She became the Orisha of the Middle Passage itself, the one who held the people in the water, who received those who did not survive the crossing, who carried the prayers of the living to the dead who sank beneath the waves. She is present in the Atlantic Ocean in a way that has nothing to do with metaphor for the communities that hold her. Now we must speak of Ifa. Because without Ifa, the Yoruba religious system is incomplete in its explanation. Ifa is both the name of a divination system and the name of the Orisha Orunmila in his function as keeper of destiny. It is one of the most sophisticated systems of knowledge organization ever developed by any human civilization. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization has recognized the Ifa divination system as part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The system works through 16 sacred palm nuts or a divining chain, manipulated by a trained diviner called a Babalawo, father of secrets. The patterns the nuts or chain create correspond to one of 256 Odu, the sacred chapters of Ifa, each containing thousands of verses, stories, proverbs, prescriptions, and histories. A fully trained Babalawo must memorize all of this. The training takes years. Some scholars estimate the total corpus of Ifa oral literature to be the single largest body of oral literature anywhere in the world. The concept at the heart of Ifa is Ori. Ori is your personal destiny, literally translated as head. Before you are born, your soul stands before Olodumare and chooses its destiny, the shape of the life it will live. You choose freely, and then you forget the choice when you arrive in the human world. The work of human life, and the work of Ifa divination, is to remember and align with the destiny you chose, not to be pushed off course by confusion, fear, or poor choices. This idea, that we chose our fate before birth and then forgot the choice, appears in Plato's Republic in the myth of air, where souls choose their next life before drinking from the river of forgetfulness. It appears in various forms in Hindu philosophy in the concept of karma carrying from life to life. It appears in the Gnostic traditions of early Christianity. The idea that the soul comes into the world with a specific purpose or nature that it must remember and enact is not uniquely African or uniquely Greek. It is a human intuition so persistent that it keeps appearing everywhere, in every era, in every language. Now let us speak of what happened when this tradition crossed the ocean. In 1619, the first enslaved Africans arrived on the shores of what would become the United States. Over the next 2 centuries, millions of people were taken from West and Central Africa, including enormous numbers from Yoruba territories. They were stripped of their names, their languages, their visible cultural practices. They were forbidden from practicing their religions in many contexts. They hid the Orishas inside the Catholic saints. Shango became Saint Barbara, because Barbara was associated with lightning. Yemoja became Our Lady of Regla. Oshun became Our Lady of Charity. Obatala became Our Lady of Mercy. From the outside, it looked like conversion. From the inside, the Orishas were simply wearing new clothes while waiting for the world to change. This is one of the most extraordinary acts of cultural preservation in human history. A tradition that crossed the Middle Passage not in books or temples or official institutions, but in the bodies and memories and prayers of enslaved people, encoded in song and dance and story and ceremony, hidden inside a borrowed religious framework, and kept alive generation after generation until it could emerge again fully in its own name. Today there are an estimated 100 million practitioners of African traditional religions rooted in the Yoruba tradition worldwide. In Brazil, the city of Salvador de Bahia has more active candomblé houses than Catholic churches. In Cuba, Santeria has practitioners from every racial and social background. In Nigeria, there is a growing renaissance of traditional Ifa practice among young educated Nigerians who see in it a sophisticated philosophical and spiritual system that is entirely their own. The Orishas did not die in the Middle Passage. They swam. Let me close by zooming out, as we always do on SERA Mythology, and drawing the connections that run beneath the surface of the world's traditions. The Yoruba concept of the Orishas as aspects or emanations of a supreme being who is too vast to approach directly has exact parallels in Hindu philosophy, where the supreme Brahman expresses itself through the many deities of the Hindu pantheon. It has parallels in the Kabbalistic tradition of Judaism, where the infinite divine expresses itself through 10 emanations called the Sphirot. It has parallels in Neoplatonic philosophy, where the One expresses itself through successive levels of being. All of these traditions, emerging from different continents, different centuries, different peoples, are saying the same thing. The absolute is too large for human contact, so it meets us where we are, through the particular, the personal, the specific. Through the Orisha who governs your river or your forge or your lightning. Through the God whose energy matches the energy of your own life. The concept of Ori, the personal destiny chosen before birth and then forgotten, is one of the most psychologically sophisticated ideas in world religion. It creates a framework in which your life is simultaneously fated and chosen, in which you bear responsibility for who you are because you chose it, while also being held by a larger intelligence that knows the shape of your life from before you were born. And the Ifa system, with its 256 Odu, its thousands of verses, its Babalawos who spend years memorizing the entire cosmos as encoded in patterns of palm nuts, is a reminder that the human hunger to understand the structure of reality, to map the invisible forces that shape a human life, to find a pattern beneath the chaos, is not a modern scientific impulse. It is as old as the human mind itself. We have always been trying to read the world. The Yoruba found one of the most beautiful and most complete ways of doing it that the human race has ever produced. This has been episode 4 of SERA Mythology. We traveled to West Africa. We stood at the edge of the primordial waters while a hen scratched the first land into being. We met the Orishas, the ones who walk with us, who are present in every river and every forge and every storm and every act of love and every grief that refuses to stay quiet. We followed a tradition across the ocean, hidden inside borrowed prayers, carried in the memory of people who lost everything except what they held inside themselves. And we found it still alive, growing, spreading, more present in the world today than at any time in the last 3 centuries. Next time, we go north. We go to the ice and the snow and the great ash tree at the center of the universe. We go to Asgard. We go to the Norse tradition, to Odin who hung himself on the world tree for 9 days to gain the wisdom of the runes. to the serpent that gnaws at the roots of everything, to Ragnarok, the end of the gods, and what it means that the gods themselves know they are going to die and choose to live fully anyway. The Orishas are walking with us right now. See you at the next fire.